Hi, YouTube. Hoping the voice holds out. Allergies. Terrible. But good things to talk about. So it'll balance out, I think. All right, here we go. It is the 200 level. Mike Carpenter in the basement studio on a Tuesday afternoon, kind of switching up the schedule a little bit with a Friday evening game coming up against Nebraska. And Sunday morning, to be honest, I know someone tweeted at me, no podcast, hungover? No, it was not that. That we did have a great time Saturday and had some friends hanging around Sunday morning. So did not get to it Sunday. I figured everyone was basking in the glow. There was the great post-game coverage from Jeremy and Joey, as there often is on Illini Inquirer. There was the Jay Lehman podcast yesterday, which is a must-listen to on Mondays. And the fun thing about Saturday in Central Michigan and the win, there was nothing really monumental about it. I mean, I guess in a way there was. You started 3-0. You're ranked for the first time since 2022, but the earliest you've been ranked in a long time, as far as early in the season. But the game itself was not monumental. It was a ho-hum. You were the better team. You got the win. You outclassed a mid-major team in Central Michigan. And you stayed healthy. And that's all I was really asking for going into it. Solid, not spectacular. And I think to me, as I was walking back out to the lots on Saturday, and what was just an absolute five-star day, had friends in town, the tailgate scene was terrific yet again, and the vibes were high, not just because of the 3-0 start, but because it feels like, hey, we might just have a good team. I'm going to use that word a lot today, good, which is not the most colorful of adjectives, but I think it is apt for this team. They are not great, at least not yet, because there are a few major flaws that keep them from getting a tag like great. But I do think they're good already. I mean, 3-0, the record would suggest that, yes, they are a good team. The scoring output from the offense would say they're good but not great. Same with the yardage. The defense, I don't know. I mean, if you were to make an argument for a great unit, it'd either be the defense or the special teams, both of which had had pretty awesome moments throughout the year. And the special teams, the kickers specifically, were phenomenal on Saturday. But more to the point, other than interior run offense, there's not really any glaring weaknesses on this team. Not yet. And if you think about the difference between the start of this season and the start of last season, what a relief. So I think that mix of walking out to the lots on what was a very hot Saturday, no doubt, a lot more manageable in the shade. There was a nice breeze, but people were cooking in the stadium. And even as I was watching the second half with my buddy Danny from the balcony, and we were behind the ADA section, so we had to really kind of stand on our tippy toes to see the whole field, still got a great vantage point and enjoyed, to me, what was just a solidly executed game plan. Your talent shone through. When you had to go get a score at the start of the third quarter, you did just that. When you had to string together stops so Central Michigan wouldn't feel any confidence, you did just that. When your kickers had to pick you up because the offense couldn't finish drives, they did just that. And good teams, if you were to say what qualifies a good team, it's one without any major weaknesses. It's one where the three units, you don't look at any one of them in particular and say, they're going to lose you a game. So that, to me, is what's really exciting. Because with Illinois football, it is often a feast or famine thing. Mostly famine, occasionally feast. And why 2022 was so exciting and then so disheartening at the end, a 7-1 start and the pure dominance from the defense and a running back like Chase Brown. And even though Tommy DeVito wasn't flashy, he was kind of like a star quarterback because of the personality that he had. It felt like all the ingredients that were there for 10-2, and I think they were, frustratingly enough. But then it just petered out at the end. And there was some bad luck involved, but there was also a couple bad performances sprinkled in there. And that was very much in line with the Illini football that I'm used to. And kind of in one season. We've had the Rose Bowl and the Sugar Bowl. They were great seasons top to bottom for the most part. That season was great until it wasn't. And then when it wasn't, it carried over into the next season, which was a 5-win season after a bowl. All too familiar with that. What about 7-5? Have we ever had a 7-5 record? Legit, I don't know if we have. How about just plain old? Well, we had 8-4 2 years ago, but what about 9-4? Like you go 8-4 in the regular season and you win a bowl game. I don't know. To me, it just seems like we are not on a path towards getting to the highest of highs because I think we're probably going to lose a game or two and probably in the near future. But we're doing what a good program would do, which is win the games you should. Occasionally win the big one if you want to call Kansas that. And yeah, I know they lost to UNLV, but keep in mind UNLV also beat Houston the week before, so maybe they aren't bad. And don't sleep on the Mountain West. I don't want no part of Mountain West teams because they always seem to compete. But this is what you want from a good program. 7 or 8 wins a year gets the coach a statue, as I'm going to read here after the break. I wrote a column yesterday, and I think that's true. I think that applies here. So when I was basking in the glow Saturday, it wasn't the same slap-happy giddiness that maybe I felt after beating Minnesota 2 years ago, and you were 6-1, and you had the easy, clear path to the Big Ten title game that you didn't end up making. At that point, I was setting myself up to be hurt. At this point, 3-0 and expecting that, I don't know, they might lose the next 2 games. Vegas will certainly say so, and I'd be okay with that. That's kind of a nice position to be in, where it's just, what the heck, we're going to lose a few games, but ultimately I think that maybe we're seeing the seeds of sustainable success. And that, to me, is the biggest thing so far of this 3-0 start. Year 4 with Brett Bielema is the second time you went undefeated in the non-conference, but in 2022, you had that early Indiana game sandwiched in between. And what that did was derail any major early momentum. I think it ultimately cost you probably tens of thousands in ticket sales because the Virginia game the following week was empty. The Chattanooga game the week after that was empty. Yeah, you won at Wisconsin, but then you could only muster up, I think, 43,000 for Iowa and maybe 50 for Minnesota and homecoming. You got close to a sellout with Michigan State, but think about this. On a really hot Saturday for an early homecoming against Central Michigan, you had 50,000 people go through the turnstiles. And sure, they might have left at halftime or third quarter because they were seeking any bit of shade or cover. And I don't blame them for that, given the opponent. But that's pretty impressive when you look at the scale of it. And while it was frustrating last year to go 5-7, there are other areas, including crowd size, where you can sort of chart in a very linear fashion growth. And now it feels like what we're seeing on the field is a sign of linear growth. Exponential? No. And that's okay. I don't need it. As I've said many, many times before, I don't need Illinois football to be great. But when they're good, when they're giving me reasons to look forward to the weekends, I'm a happy guy. And right now, I'm a happy guy. And you're probably a happy fan as well. So, what we're going to talk about today, a little bit of the Central Michigan game, things that we saw, though I think the Central Michigan game was a good summation for the non-conference. Top to bottom, it was pretty indicative of what we've seen from this team so far. We have the Nebraska game coming up Friday. We will talk about that. We're going to look at the Big Ten as a whole, and we're going to open up the listener mailbag to see how you are feeling. In one word, how are you feeling after the 3-game start to this season? But first, got to hit the sponsors real quick, including Hamilton Walkers. As I mentioned in the intro of this podcast, you should come out to Hamilton Walkers on Thursday, October 3rd, where Lon and I will be doing a book release event in the front room by the bar. This is the best restaurant in downtown Champaign, in Champaign-Urbana, for that matter. And I'm excited that they're giving us the opportunity to host it there. While you're there, you could check out their menu. It is a scratch kitchen with the best steak and seafood in town. And since you'll be in the front bar area, talk to the bartender. He can mix you up one of their signature cocktails, just the best spirits menu in Champaign, and the best old-fashioned, which I will be having one during the book release event. The great thing about writing a book is they expect authors to drink. It's just kind of in the job description. So I think Lon and I will imbibe in one celebratory beverage during our recording. But whether it's a pregame spot, you can get a hamburger for $20 there, no joke. A pregame spot before an Illinois game, or date night, or anything in between. Hamilton Walkers in downtown Champaign is your spot, and we really appreciate their sponsorship. Okay, I also got to thank Dogtown Heating, Air, and Plumbing, your home's best friend, at 217-841-4728. They are excellent with customer service, and they came out a couple weeks ago, I guess it was 2.5 weeks ago, when our AC failed overnight. They were out by 1:30 the next day, had it fixed by 1:40. I think it was like 10 minutes. But having called them talk to the receptionist, talk to the technician. That is what has impressed me the most with Dogtown, and we have a service plan with them where each year they check our AC and furnace and do a great job of that. That's Dogtown Heating, Air, and Plumbing, your home's best friend at 217-841-4728. Also, got to thank State Farm agent Brian Hansen, online at brianismyguy.com for life, auto, home, business, renters, you name it. Brian is my guy, and he can be your guy as well at brianismyguy.com. And I talk about customer service. That's another area where they excel. Just got our new auto insurance cards right on time, actually ahead of time. So thank you, Brian, for that. And anytime you need to have a question answered about coverage or something like that, you give them a call or you give them an email. You get something back, no joke, within minutes. They are so good at getting back to their clients. That's Brian Hansen, State Farm agent at brianismyguy.com. And finally, Owen Builders LLC, online at owenbuildersllc.com for home additions, patios, decks. They got a variety of things they can do, and you can check out a gallery of their work online at owenbuildersllc.com. Champagne Showers Podcast Network, and appreciate you, the listener and the viewer. Just today, there was a podcast released, the first of my Making the Media rounds, with Emily Harrington on what is called the Hyperlocals podcast. And she interviews people in Champaign-Urbana from varying walks of life. And I popped on there about 4 weeks ago. It just dropped today. And it was the best interview I've ever been a part of. In other words, I'm not used to being the interviewee. And the questions were great. Runs the gamut. Talked about the book, talked about the podcast, talked about teaching, but had a really good time with her. And if you want to look that up, Hyperlocals podcast, hosted by Emily Harrington. It just dropped today. Okay, let's talk about this football team and why being good feels so good. And what I did yesterday, and I'm just going to read this real quick, is dropped a column on our Substack, which is at the 200level.substack.com. I just called it Feeling All Right. After a 2023 season, to forget the 2024 Illini appear to be just plain good. It's unusual to feel good about Illinois football in the middle of September. Even in the Brett Bielema era, one objectively better than the 6 previous coaching tenures, each season's first 3 games have left as many questions as answers. In 2021, his first team won a thrilling opener against Nebraska at home, only to lose the next week to UTSA and get shellacked at Virginia. In 2022, a frustrating road loss at Indiana in Game 2 dredged up thoughts of same old Illinois before they went on to win their next 6 games. In 2023, an escape against Toledo raised plenty of yellow flags before Kansas turned them bright red in Game 2. So while it has been better, it hasn't often felt better, especially in the early going. What a relief it is, on September 16th, now the 17th, to be writing about an undefeated Illinois team. For years, we've envied our Big Ten rivals who take care of business in the non-conference slate. We've watched others getting a leg up on bowl contention before playing a single game outside of their home stadium. Finally, after a 13-year drought from a 3-0 start, we've done just that. Walking out to Lot 31 after Saturday's 30-9 victory over Central Michigan, the buzz amongst orange-clad Illini fans was palpable. The game itself was a rather ho-hum affair, but exciting in its relative ho-hummedness. Our guys took care of business against a lesser opponent, as good teams do, and emerged from the non-conference unscathed with a head start on bowl eligibility. This isn't to say Bielema's 4th team is perfect. Far from it, in fact. The interior run game continues to struggle, an area of weakness that could cost them against stronger teams. The defensive line lacks a dominant figure like Johnny Newton, which raises questions about how they'll perform against Big Ten rushing attacks. There are other concerns, too. Luke Altmaier's having a strong start to the season, but has appeared passive in early parts of the game. After a relatively clean game against Kansas, the entire team amassed far too many penalties against Central Michigan. The tight end position is a non-factor in the passing game, and no one has emerged as a go-to in the slot. The third down conversion rate on offense is a 39%. But really, is that it? When writing that last paragraph, I had to dig a bit to find any truly worrying signs about this football team. In short, I think this Illinois team is good. Not great, not elite, just good. And isn't that what we've always wanted? For decades, we've joked about how any coach who wins 7-8 games a year will get their own statue outside Memorial Stadium. Only, it's not a joke. It's the truth. In college football, there's a clear line that separates the programs who perpetually go 7-5 and better, or 5-7 and worse. who does the least amount of stupid stuff. Through 3 games, this Illini team has done an excellent job of avoiding stupid stuff. Outside of a penalty-ridden afternoon against CMU, can we blame the oppressive heat for pre-snap sloppiness? They've avoided costly flags. The quarterback isn't throwing picks, and the receivers aren't dropping balls. Defenders aren't missing tackles, kickers aren't doinking it off the crossbars, and the punter isn't launching low-line drives to set up a big return for the opposition. Hell, even Brett has avoided too many administrative timeouts and futile coaches' challenges. In addition to steering clear of the sloppiness that dooms most teams, the Illini are playing objectively clean football. They're possessing the ball for over 32 minutes a game. They've turned the ball over only once, while their defense has taken it away from the opponents 9 times already. Good, not stupid, clean, opportunistic. These qualities won't necessarily land you in the college football playoff, but they will land you in a bowl game. Considering the mess that was 2023, getting halfway to bowl eligibility in the first 3 games is a massive accomplishment. It quells a lot of concerns many fans, myself included, had about the Bielema tenure. Clearly, we're in a better place. But were we doomed to eternal stagnation and 5 and 7 near misses? So far in 2024, that doesn't appear to be the case. To be clear, this doesn't mean I'll be predicting upset victories at Nebraska or Penn State. I won't. There's a better chance this team is going 3-2 into the bye week than 4-1, or can you even imagine 5-0? But even a 3-2 record affords Illinois so many more paths to bowl eligibility. In order to play a 13th game, they merely have to win 3 of their last 9. Some games previously thought as toss-ups, Purdue at Northwestern, now appear to be should-wins, along with home matchups against Minnesota and Michigan State. Michigan's persistent QB issues make the October 19th game look more feasible. Nebraska, Penn State, Oregon, and Rutgers all present tough challenges on the road, but Bielema's teams have a track record of winning at least one big road game. In 2021, it was Penn State and Minnesota, 2022, Wisconsin, 2023, Maryland, and Minnesota again. Will they emerge victorious in every should-win game? Probably not. Will they lose every tough game? Probably not. The hope is somehow those balance out, which lands Illinois squarely at 7-5, a record that before the season would have had me over the moon with excitement. 8 wins is on the table if they hold serve in every should win and grab a marquee victory along the way. 9, pinch me. Of course, worse scenarios are in play, not just because it's Illinois football, but because of the sport itself. Injuries can devastate a team, bad breaks can seemingly snowball, good vibes can quickly vanish. Thing is, it won't take a Herculean effort for this season to retain those good vibes. This Illini team has been playing well and in areas that appear to be sustainable. After a lifetime of boom or bust seasons, mostly the latter, there's something reassuring about what we've seen so far. It's filtered into the tailgating lots outside Memorial Stadium and given fans a taste of what a solid but not spectacular football program would feel like. We've seen the Sugar, Rose, and ReliaQuest Bowls after surprisingly successful seasons, only to be followed up by 5 and 7 disappointments. Why not trade in the random once-in-a-decade New Year's Day postseason game for consistent appearances in the Music City, Duke's Mayo, and Pinstripe Bowls? 4 years into Bielema's tenure at Illinois, it feels like the program is closer to something sustainable than it has been in a long, long time. So, that's why I'm feeling good. This appears sustainable, right? Oh, the article's over, by the way. End quote. That's just it. I think they can win games like this. I think they can win games on this schedule in the manner that they won them already. Do I think they beat Nebraska? I don't. I think it's competitive because you'll see a freshman QB for Nebraska at times look like a freshman QB. But I think that their strength, defensive line, against your weakness, interior run game, is going to make you one-dimensional on offense. And as much as I like Pat Bryant and Zachary Franklin, and as much as I like the way Luke has been playing, especially in the second half, I just feel like that's a recipe for one big turnover that can flip a game and see Nebraska potentially covering. It's at 8.5, I think, still, the spread. And I think that's accurate because it's a road game, tough environment against a team that is playing really sound football and is really good in the trenches. Boring as that sounds, I got to give Matt Rule credit for the way that he's built that and relatively quickly. I'm sure with the help of a lot of NIL money. And that's Nebraska football. They just care more. And they got a whole century's worth of football history that kind of backs that up. But I think we hang. I think at Penn State we hang. The dream would be to win both, but let's be honest. The more realistic dream is to win one of two. And I was kind of waffling back and forth on which one is more likely. On paper, it would still be Nebraska. But I don't trust James Franklin. And they're playing, I think, Kent State the week before they play Illinois. So, yeah, this week they're playing Kent State at home. Not exactly getting them ready for Illinois. I think that you can go in and just catch them napping. They haven't really played anybody yet. Do I expect to win that? No, I don't. I expect to probably be 3-2 going into Purdue, but that's okay. And as I said in this article, Purdue, and quick aside, because I don't want to forget this, that was the funniest damn thing I think I'd ever seen on Saturday. Illinois wins, they're 3-0. Hey, let's turn on the Notre Dame-Purdue game. For some reason, just like the Michigan-Texas game the week before, I wanted to take the alternate spread and give Notre Dame even more points. I don't know why I didn't. I feel like a fool. This is why I'm not good at betting. So it's 42-0 at halftime. The spread was 7.5. I knew that Notre Dame would probably come out angry, but I still didn't trust their offense to win by, even 17 points. I thought that Purdue, this is their game of the year so far, so they're going to come out inspired. And they suck. They just suck. Illinois is not losing 66-7 to Notre Dame at home. They aren't. And maybe Notre Dame and their superior talent pulls away late, but I think we would have hung for at least a little bit. And Purdue just got their asses handed to them. And I don't want to get personal about it, but I certainly don't feel bad that it happened to Ryan Walters and his braggadocious, just oozing, smarmy, I'm cooler than you, look at my biceps, I'm a young, hip guy. Don't fall for the banana in the tailpipe, folks. He's a defensive coordinator and does not appear to be a head coach. We need to kill them on October 12th. And I think after a bye week, Illinois will do just that. It's time. It's the great release. All that anger that Brett Bielema probably feels for that program and his former protege, unleash it and smoke them. I love the bye week before that game. I really do. And I'm not worried about looking ahead to Michigan because I know for a damn fact Brett Bielema has that game circled. And I know we did last year. The team was just in a really bad spot. They don't appear to be in that sort of dire straits at the moment. Illinois, I mean. But, yeah, I pulled up this old Twitter video of Ryan Walters after they got Hudson Card, and he's kind of bobbing his head. Yeah, I'm cool. And it's like, dude, it's probably not going to work. And part of the reason I was so frustrated last year with Purdue, and this is why I hate losing to Purdue. They drive me insane. They drive me batty. They bore me as an athletic program, and yet they beat us where it counts. That drives me absolutely bonkers. But my big issue last year was Purdue ruined two programs. In my mind, they had ruined two programs themselves because they got a coach that probably isn't going to work, and two, us, because we had a defensive coordinator that had he been here last year, I bet Illinois makes a bowl game, and we're still just kind of rolling along. Instead, first-year Aaron Henry, who has been much better so far, but will be very much tested the next 2 weeks. And that just really, an aside there, but I just had to get that out about Purdue. I really did. It was so nice to see. I don't care about, they're in the Big Ten. It's an 18-team Big Ten. I'm okay with all the other Big Ten teams sucking. In football especially. And actually, I don't care what the sport is. This idea that I'm rooting for Big Ten teams, no, I am not. I'm rooting for my team. And if the other Big Ten teams suck, hey, great. I'll take the conference title. Thank you. Even if it's a title because of attrition around you, give me that banner. Unfortunately, Purdue has been getting in the way of that too many damn times. Okay, enough about Purdue. Sorry, a little bit of an aside there. But I mentioned them and Northwestern are should wins. Come on. That's 5. Michigan State, Minnesota. God, even if you slip up against one of them, that's 6. And knowing Brett Bielema and the way that these last 3 seasons have gone into this one, he typically gets a game that you would not expect. Now, last year, are we going to say at Maryland? Well, Vegas didn't expect that. I sure as hell didn't expect that. I think it was like a 17.5-point spread. They thought the younger Tua, who has at least a few less concussions than his older brother, they thought that he was probably going to smoke us. I did too. They didn't. But that's the Mike Locksley effect that I should have accounted for. But every year, Brett Bielema tends to win a game, or maybe even two, that you would not expect. And I would imagine that that is going to happen at some point this year. Even if that's the Michigan game, which appears to be the most winnable marquee game by some margin because they don't have a quarterback. And that's, in the game of football, somewhat important. So I sit here today and I'm like, well, what's more likely, 7-5 or 8-4? I would still say 7-5 because of the interior run game issues, which struggled early last year and eventually did get figured out, but that's still a fairly big issue. And I think that there will be some games where the defense just struggles because the defensive line, I don't trust them against great big lines with great running backs. They escape by the skin of their teeth, run defense-wise against Kansas. It was part of the game plan, and it worked out for them. But I do think the likes of a Nebraska or a Penn State or an Oregon or even a Michigan, who still has the line, and they'll gel together a little bit more before they play us, and they still have running backs. I do worry about those more grinded-out games. Less so the Michigan States, the Minnesotas, the Purdues, the Northwesterns. Even the Rutgers game. I just feel like when all is said and done and the dust settles, this feels like 7-5. And I would be very, very happy with that. Of course, I'd like 8-4. I'd love 9-3, but 7-5. I said before the season I'd be over the moon if that happened, and that remains the case. All right. Real quick here. So I'm going to hit up the listener mailbag. And Ethan, good to see you here. Ethan says, hey, man, listening to Hyperlocal podcast. I grew up playing right field. Not cool, man. I made a comment on this podcast about how I knew I wasn't an athlete when I was younger because in baseball, they stuck me in right field or second base. And the point being, there were no left-handed hitters. So if you're in right field, you're getting no action. Who's the worst fielder? Stick him out there. Now, Ethan, you might have been good, and maybe there were some lefties in your league. I was just saying, for my case, it seemed appropriate that they sent my ass out to right field. And Ethan got his book today. Excellent, Ethan. Glad that you got it. I hope you enjoy it. And the books are out now. All the pre-order copies have been shipped. So October 3rd is when this bad boy drops, and that'll be available locally and at Amazon. In all formats, by the way. Hardcover, paperback, Kindle, and what's the other one? Oh, yeah, audiobook. Now, back to football. The question that I asked on Twitter today was the 3-0 start. One word, okay? One word to describe how you're feeling about this team after the 3-0 start. From Ethan, who's also in here, nonplussed. I've been really unsure how to feel. And as I was reading your tweet, and I think that perfectly describes it, yeah, I'm the guy who was always an outrageous record prediction, but now that we're 3-0 after beating Kansas, well, I'm nonplussed. Now, I'm an English teacher, and I think I know what nonplussed means, but I'll be honest, Ethan, I had to just confirm it and look up the definition on Google right now. Here's what nonplussed means. It means surprised and confused so much that they're unsure how to react. I get that. And to me, Ethan, why this feels so good at 3-0 is I did not necessarily expect that. Even though I predicted Kansas would be the biggest win of the year, and I think that might still be the case, despite their struggles against UNLV, big in that it gave you a leg up to have a good season. I thought it was imperative that if this was going to be a season where you could breathe a little bit easier and just kind of enjoy the ride, you had to win the Kansas game, and they did that. So I find during the Central Michigan game that when they kicked the field goal to go up 7 points at halftime, I'm not worried about it. We got it. No big deal. We weren't playing great in the first half offensively, but I figured we'll pick it up when we need to, and they did. But there is a little bit of that nonplussed factor where I, too, Ethan, am thinking, what the hell do I do with this? Like, I think I just kind of like this team, and I kind of know what they are, I feel like, and maybe this is the sign of a coach who is well-entrenched, well-established, and just kind of knows what he's doing here. And I want to be clear, too, with Brett Bielema. Like, despite what I wrote in April, and I did question, like, where's this going? What are we doing? He had a strong close of the offseason. But I even acknowledged in that article, he is clearly the best coach we've had, and I think we need to ride it out for a while. But that if this is going to be sustainable for the long, long term, things need to start happening. So that's why, Ethan, the nonplussed thing, I'm a bit nonplussed too, because I'm thinking, well, what if this is the start of sustained success? Year 1 and 3 were the blips. Year 2 was the early, oh, they could do this. And then year 4 is when you start to settle in. I would be over the moon. I would be so ecstatic if that turns out to be the case. From Dave. I just also look at all this and don't know if it was in your write-up or covered elsewhere. But Illinois always, and a lot of teams do too, loses their first road game. Do I have hope? Yes. A lot? No. Just solely because the first road game is hard. Yeah, I would agree with you, and that's why, Dave, I'm not going to pick a win. Though I'm excited to watch it, and I'm going to go in with a what the hell, let's see what happens. And I wouldn't be shocked if they won. I wouldn't be shocked if we're watching this game and the freshman QB looks like a freshman QB, and they get their rushing yards, but there's like 2 timely interceptions by the Illinois defense. And gosh, if I were to try to make a prediction, Dave, I do think one key, if the offense can score 24 points, 24, 3 touchdowns and a field goal, I think you got a shot. I'd even say 23, 2 touchdowns, 3 field goals, and you got the kickers to do it. I think 23-24 range gives you a shot. I think 28, you win. And is it doable? I guess. I think this is the statistics and metrics would show this is by far the best defense you've played so far. It is on the road in a very tough environment, and that environment is not going to ease up. Not even a 14-0 lead late is going to quell that noise that you're going to hear at that stadium. But, boy, oh boy, it'd be a massive statement. I mean, you got 2 road games at night coming up against Nebraska and Penn State. Would I prefer they be 11 a.m. games? Sure. But they aren't. So, you got 2 teams. I think once the game starts, sometimes the crowd noise and the other variables, I don't know how much they matter. I think it's just in terms of lining up, do you have the dudes to compete with Nebraska? You do. You do. I think a lot of the spread is being based on line play and sort of like the known quantities. You know that Nebraska, the way they're set up, seems less likely to maybe make game-altering mistakes, which seems counterintuitive because our takeaways to giveaways is just astronomical, 9-1 right now. I think a lot of people probably think that's not sustainable when you go on the road in Nebraska. We'll see, though. I mean, if they maintain that sort of 3-1 or 3-0 takeaway advantage, they're winning that game on Friday. And wouldn't that be fun? Holy crap. From Elena, puckered, in the sense that I'm very, very happy with the 3-0 start, but I'm fairly sure, based on past performance, that we are not going to win a night game on our first road trip of the year. Yeah. Elena, what if it's a nice warm-up for the road game, the night game at Penn State? I don't think it's wide out, so that's good news because I do have shades of 2008 when you went in there with juice and Aurelius Ben. It just didn't go well. Really, from the start. But I could totally see you going into Penn State, and it's James Franklin we're talking about. James Franklin will never, ever scare me. He just won't. And I still feel like, in a weird way, my gut says you have a better chance of winning at Penn State than Nebraska. And if you said why, I wouldn't say, well, because they have less talent. No, they have more talent than Nebraska. But James Franklin is James Franklin. I don't trust the guy. And I like that I don't trust him because that means that you can spring an upset. You did 3 years ago at Happy Valley against a top 10 team. You're a lot better now than you were then, I think. And I think you'll hang. Drew Aller, come on. I remember last year on Jeremy's podcast, they talked to a Penn State guy, and oh my God. I mean, by the end of it, you would have thought that Drew Aller was the second coming of Joe Namath. I mean, just the greatest quarterback that side of the Mason-Dixon line. And what did he do? He's fine. He's just your typical Penn State quarterback. I've seen a million of them. The Christian Hackenbergs of the world. Robert W. Menge. Hey, Robert. Hopeful. Coach Bielema has the players and staff now time to come together for what will be a tough Big Ten season. Yeah, and the good news, Robert, is that even if they go 4-5, that's a 7-5 season. I don't want to discount what Brett Bielema can do in the Big Ten, though. And overall, his Big Ten record is pretty good, especially compared to previous Illini coaches. Is it a safe bet to think Brett Bielema will finish above 500 in most Big Ten seasons? I think that's a fairly safe assumption. The reason we're a little bit hesitant to do that this year is because of the schedule. If you had last year's schedule with this year's Illini team, I think you're dreaming really big right now and thinking, well, where are the losses? It'd be hard to find them. It would be more difficult for sure. But I don't know, man. 5-4 in the Big Ten for Brett Bielema, and that would mean an 8-4 season. It's right there. I mean, you're gonna have to win a game that you wouldn't necessarily expect, but I don't know. I could see it. So I too am hopeful, Robert. From Tyler, reassured. Last year seemed like a step back, but through 3 games, I feel reassured Bielema and staff will keep us competitive constantly. I am getting back to that too, Tyler. I do have that little part of me, though, that does worry if there's dramatic rollback on Friday. Like the wheels come off for whatever reason, tough road game. And not comparing this Nebraska team to last year's Kansas team. I don't think the offense is that explosive, but there's something about that. Indiana 2 years ago. Kansas last year. Friday night games on the road. Oh, boy, oh, boy. But, play the damn game. I mean, I feel like sometimes as fans, we overcomplicate it or we allow past to be precedent. That's fair when you're a Illini football fan, and the past often has been precedent. But, this would be like the 472nd biggest upset of the 2024 college football season, which is to say, not that big of an upset at all. It would get some play on SportsCenter that night. There'd be some talking points leading up to the Illinois Penn State game. But when the season and the dust settles, the national college football fan is not going to circle, wow, that Illinois win at Nebraska, that was one of the craziest upsets I've ever seen, because it just simply wouldn't be. You're essentially being told that Nebraska is, if it's 8.5 spread, they say, 3 points for the home team or 3.5. You're essentially being told that Nebraska is less than a touchdown better than Illinois. Okay, I would tend to agree with that. And I'd tend to say that these two teams on a neutral field would play pretty damn even. So we're really only accounting for this negativity based on the fact it's not here, but it's there. If this game were here on Friday night, I'd be predicting a win. So with Brett Bielema's track record on the road, few notable exceptions like at Kansas last year, they tend to do fairly well. So anyone predicting a 21-point loss is doing so based on the Kansas game last year, right? But I think the more reasonable thing is to predict a team will win by 1 score. And I think another thing, too, Tyler, you mentioned reassured. Last year was so unassuring, or is that a word? Not reassuring, because you kept losing close games. Let's say this is a close game in the fourth quarter, 3 points either way. Go and win it. Why not? Luke Altmaier, you're a junior. This Raiola kid is really good, but he's a freshman starting game 4 against the best defense he's faced yet. Not an elite defense, but a defense that looks at some playmakers, right? And kudos to Aaron Henry and Bielema for that. But, okay, if you're in that position in the fourth quarter, go win it. And that to me, Tyler, is where it gets exciting. If we're watching this Friday night, and we will be doing a live podcast in the garage. My buddy Kent will join us. He was there for the March run for Illini basketball. And, yeah, we'll just have a good old garage party watching the game, and why the heck not? I do feel bad. God, the game starts at 7. My neighbor, I don't think they stay up very late, so I'll have to try to not react too loudly if things go good. From Teddy, cautiously optimistic. Impressed by the play of the secondary, concerned about our run defense, extremely concerned about our offensive line issues. Nebraska will be an incredibly tough game, well-coached team in a very tough environment. All that said, F it. Let's go win it. Teddy, I am not extremely concerned about the offensive line, only because, 1, it's not as bad as it was through Game 3 last year. It's not to that level. 2, I think they're ready to make personnel moves and just say, okay, like they're going to dangle that personnel thing above everyone's head. You don't do well, your ass is on the bench. And that needs to happen because it's year 4 of the program. If you have depth at the offensive line, use it. If a guy's not doing his job, sit him. They keep talking about Henderson. I would imagine he will be in the rotation. I bet he'll be a starting guard by the end of the year. I think the Krutz will be fine. He's getting his footing back after being injured for most of camp. So the question is, does Geske or does Chrysler keep that other guard position? I think your tackles are fine. But you do need to have them coalesce. And you need to have them coalesce to a degree where you can run it for over 100 yards for sure on Friday if you want a chance to win. It's going to be tough against Nebraska's defensive line. I do worry in a game like this for Khalil Valentine, who has looked so good. But he could take a pop from a defender that I worry, okay, ball security, little freshman, does that ever become a concern? But I also feel like Caden Fagan breakout game. It's time. And I wonder if some guys it's not opponent based. The lights get brighter and they're like, okay, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to actually produce. And I feel like Caden Fagan, I'm not talking necessarily a 100-yard game, but I say 75 to 80 yards and looking better. I could see that. Banana Champagne. Hey, Banana. I'm actually going with a 45% chance to win. I think we've gotten to a point where the Illini aren't going to be blown out by anyone besides Oregon. We'll see about that, Banana. However, I think Illinois is going to lose by a hair, similar to how they lost to Iowa last season. And hey, Banana Champagne, I think that is the more likely outcome. Road game, it truly is 3 or 4 plays that often decide these things. It's not like college football is the NFL where the parity is insane and every game is seemingly going down the last possession. But when you get to Big Ten play, it's fairly negligible, the difference between teams. You're in that middle rung with Nebraska. I think they have a leg up based on talent accrual over the offseason and what Matt Rule has done. Matt Rule is an imperfect coach, but if he is good at one thing, it is kind of establishing the baseline of a program to be good. We'll see if we can turn them back into a blue blood. I don't know about that, but I would tend to agree that Banana Champagne, the likeliest outcome is a close loss. Now, would I be disappointed? If you're right in there and you don't quite win it, of course I'd be disappointed. But I wouldn't be disheartened. And that's what I'm hoping to avoid on Friday is any sort of result where you're disheartened. You can be 3-1. You can be 3-2. But if you look the part of a solid team that just lost some tough road games, I do think that is valuable learning experience for a team that has a lot of winnable games coming up further down the road. And if you compete and have a shot to win these next 2 games, I have no concerns about you beating Purdue or Northwestern, less concerns about beating Michigan State or Minnesota, and there's your 7. And then take your shots against Michigan or on the road against Rutgers. And yeah, it's fun, though, everyone, to sit here at a 3-0 spot and be able to think of many paths to a good season, one that you would be very satisfied with. And that is not what we've been afforded the last 3 years, where there's always been an early hiccup where we feel like, we're going to have to play catch-up at some point. In some years, you played catch-up quickly enough. In other years, you haven't. Now, you get the head start. Hence why I called this podcast, what the heck did I call it? Halfway to a bowl with 3 quarters to go. Lengthy, but that's just it. You're halfway there with 3 quarters of the season to go. That's a good spot to be in. I put up a poll, and I didn't really think this through as well as I should have. The poll was, what tough road game do you think Illinois has the best chance to win? I put all 4 road games in there. I don't count Northwestern as one because it's at Wrigley and not exactly a tough environment. It'll probably be more Illini than Northwestern fans. But I did put Nebraska, Penn State, Oregon, and Rutgers. Now, only 2% of you thought it would be Oregon. 6.6% thought Penn State. And I feel in a weird way like that would be the one to sneak in. 18.5% said Nebraska, and then Rutgers. And I question whether I put it on there or not. But here's the thing. Rutgers is going to be a tough road game. It is. I don't know if they have the dynamic offensive talent where if you are cooking offensively late in the year, which I think if this team is ever cooking, it'll be as it goes along, then I will feel better about our prospects in that game. And the thing about a season, I mean, gosh, go back to last year. Gut feelings about games are going to change about 15 times between now and the month or 2 later when they were actually played. We might watch Rutgers this year with a very easy schedule, mind you, and they might just kind of sputter their way to a 4-5 record, and we might be like, wait a second, come on, you got to win this game. Remains to be seen, and you got to go out there and do it. I would assume that Piscataway is a sneaky, tough environment. I mean, Rutgers fans are, if anything, loud, and it is Jersey, and I love Jersey. I love the East Coast, but I just feel like Rutgers, of course, is the obvious choice, but I don't want to sleep on how tough that game would be. I left it in the poll, probably silly. I should have just put Nebraska, Penn State, Oregon. But then I knew that everyone would just say Nebraska is the most likely win. So it's 2 tiers, I think. Tough road games are Nebraska, Rutgers. Even tougher, Penn State and Oregon, based on the talent they have. Are they going to win one of those? Ask yourself that. Are they going to win one of those? If you think they are, you are starting to broach 8-4 territory. Just one. 8-4 territory if you win one of those games. And what you're doing is you're buying yourself some margin of error to get 7-5. Now, would I take 6-6? Yes, I would. If this team continues to play well, though, they should do better than that. So it's holding two truths at once. Yes, as an Illini fan, don't ever take a bowl appearance for granted. But two, look at the team in front of you, look at the schedule in front of you, and now that you got that 3-0 head start, what is a realistic expectation? Which is why I continue to arrive at 7-5. Nice place to be, though, right? I mean, before the Kansas game, I predicted a win. Why? Because they had to. It wasn't logical so much as, damn it, you just have to. There's no option. You got to win that game. And they did. And what did that afford us? It afforded us the ability to not necessarily dream big, but just to take a deep breath and say, okay, now we can just kind of enjoy the ebbs and flows of a season. There will be some highs, there will be some lows, but when it all settles, will we be looking at a potential 7, maybe best case 8-win season? That's on the table. And that would be a sign of true improvement and maybe of a program gaining its footing in year 4 under Brett Bielema. And that, to me, would be the most exciting thing of all. All right, so what are we going to do the rest of this week? Friday night, we will be live in the garage, Kenton and myself, drink in hand, maybe a cigar, ready to watch Illinois at Nebraska. We'll do the second half, which, of course, can go a little bit long. I know the Kansas game, we didn't even bother because it was a blowout by halftime. I guess if that happened on Friday, I'd consider just saying, hey, guys, we'll talk Saturday. But I think you'll be in it. I think it'll be a close game. I really do. I don't predict a win. Let's say something like Nebraska 24, Illinois 20, where you're still like, dang it, that run game, just not the consistency yet. Maybe one icky turnover by Luke, who so far has been clean. But it's just bound to happen. And listen, if he doesn't throw a pick, if Caden Fagan gets like 80 yards, and if the defense gets 2 takeaways, I think you win the game. It's just knowing that things can go wrong on the road, and 1 or 2 things going wrong can spell the difference in a game. So I will predict close loss. I'm not really ready to put myself out there yet. It's okay if they lose. It's not okay if they get the doors blown off of them. You don't want that. And you shouldn't have that in year 4. But if I can wake up Saturday thinking, oh, okay, we'll be all right, then I'm in a good place. And I think there's more likely outcomes than not that you will wake up feeling that way Saturday. Now imagine waking up and you're 4-0. That'd be a whole other ball game. And wouldn't that be fun? All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Got to thank Hamilton Walkers, Steak, Seafood, and Spirits in downtown Champaign, the best restaurant for my money in downtown Champaign, in Champaign-Urbana, in East Central Illinois, in Central Illinois. And Monte and I will be there on October 3rd for a book release event. It's no reservation required. Come in. We're going to have tables set up. We got bar stools. Make yourselves at home. Get an old-fashioned, which is what I'll be having. Order some food. There's going to be full service out there in the bar area. And Lon and I will just be shooting the breeze about the book, Illini basketball, Illini sports, and having a good time. So I hope you guys can make it out there. Would love to see you and say hi. I'll have a few books to sign if people haven't ordered their copy yet. Also got to thank State Farm agent Brian Hansen, online at brianismyguy.com. Dogtown Heating, Air, and Plumbing, your home's best friend. Give them a call at 217-841-4728. And finally, got to thank Owen Builders, LLC, online at owenbuildersllc.com. For Champagne Showers Podcast Network, appreciate them and appreciate you. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you Friday night. Back in the garage. It was undefeated for basketball season. Can we sprinkle some of that pixie dust onto the football program? We shall see. It is the 200 level. All right, YouTube, thanks for tuning in on this Tuesday evening, and we will see you Friday from the garage. Bye, everybody.